It is NIL go time. Will the House settlement rules be able to curb outrageous NIL deals from happening?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime college basketball podcaster, Andy Patton. You are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day, even here as we get into the month of July. I want to thank all of you for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day, and remind you that you can listen to the show ad-free by using Amazon Music. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first bet of $5 or more wins. Well, the Pac-12 made the addition of the Texas State Bobcats official, grabbing the school out of the Sun Belt Conference. We're going to talk about that, what's next for the Pac-12, what this means for the Pac-12 from the men's basketball perspective. We're also going to, since we're talking Pac-12 hoops, we're going to stay talking about the Gonzaga Bulldogs and talk about their latest addition, Mario Saint-Supery, a 6'3" guard from Spain who committed to the program on Monday. We'll talk about him, what his addition means for Mark Few's team. But first, before we get into either of those topics, we are going to start because it is July 1st. That means that the major rules, everything that came out of that House settlement that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that's obviously been a huge storyline in college athletics for years now at this point, July 1st being the date where many of these rules start to go into effect. So what I want to talk about for today's show is NIL GO, which is specifically created as a kind of software to operate the new NIL clearinghouse to vet these NIL deals from third-party sources. So we'll take a little bit of a step back first. Obviously, the House settlement was completed and approved a couple of weeks ago. We knew many of these rules were going into effect on July 1st. One of the things that came out of this is that the power conferences together collectively created an enforcement entity called the College Sports Commission. And the goal of the College Sports Commission, it is entirely separate from college athletics, entirely separate from the NCAA. The goal of this commission is to enforce NIL restrictions, roster limits, and rev share. The CEO for the College Sports Commission is Brian Seeley, who is a former MLB executive and U.S. Attorney General. He's tasked with building both an investigative arm and an enforcement arm of this new College Sports Commission. Part of that is the new NIL GO software. This was created to operate the new clearinghouse for the NIL and, again, to vet any NIL deal that is submitted through this software of $600 or more. And if it's being paid by a collective, if it's being paid by a booster, if it's being paid directly by a brand, and that brand has some kind of association with a particular school, this College Sports Commission is going to take a good hard look at any of those NIL deals and make their determinations. Their goal is to determine if the deal is, quote, fair market value. And the factors they will be looking at: relationship between the payer and the school, whether the athlete is selling a good or a service, and whether money offered is commensurate with other NIL deals. What the NCAA, or I guess what the commissioners or conferences are hoping to avoid here, is the pay for play. The NCAA is still holding on to the idea that student athletes are being paid for their name, image, likeness, and that they are not being paid just to play football or basketball or baseball or whatever at their respective schools. So these NIL deals, again, these are the third-party NIL deals. Every program has, or every school has $20.5 million that they can spend however they see fit on their student athletes. But for additional third-party NIL deals, those still have to be not pay for play. They have to be vetted by this College Sports Commission to determine if there is actually a viability to what the actual deal is promising in pay and what is being asked of the student athlete, and if it is still kind of being paid through that lens of name, image, and likeness. The College Sports Commission will come to one of three conclusions at the end of their investigations into each of these deals, either cleared, not cleared, or needs more information. But what I thought was interesting, and what I want to talk about here, is the fact that if it is determined it is not cleared, if the College Sports Commission comes back and says, nope, that's not good with us, you have three options. You can appeal to another third-party separate entity. You can also just redo the deal, rewrite it either with less money or more restrictions or whatever you need to change to make the deal viable, or you can just proceed anyway. That was one of the options listed. You could just proceed and keep going. And the website says there will be punishments, of course, and it says up to and including loss of eligibility. But who's enforcing that? Is this and is this even enforceable? This to me feels like the huge upcoming question that I suspect we're going to start getting answers to, or at least starting to have discourse around very soon, like very, very soon. A couple other notes on this. Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, said the punishment has not been decided and basically said they're going to leave it up to Seeley, the CEO of the new College Sports Commission, to help determine kind of some of those the punishments and at what level they're going to be. I imagine that obviously going forward with a $1,000 deal that they didn't approve versus a $1.5 million deal that they didn't approve is going to result in different punishments, but that's something they have not finalized or publicized or determined at this point yet. But antitrust laws may make it difficult for a separate entity, in this case, the College Sports Commission, to be the determiner of fair market value. I don't know that if a lawsuit were to happen, if this College Sports Commission would be given the green light to say, yes, you are the sole arbiter of what is fair market value in this huge NIL landscape that's brand new, that does not have a ton of precedent. Like, it feels like we're barreling towards some kind of lawsuit and significant litigation to figure out what exactly does this mean and what exactly is enforceable here. Effectively, can this third-party group, the College Sports Commission, are they legally allowed to determine what a student athlete can and cannot make financially from a third-party NIL deal? I'm not sure if the answer is conclusively yes, they are allowed to do that. And so I think this is going to get a little interesting. It's going to potentially get a little messy. To that point, the power conferences have already asked their schools to sign a memo saying that they will not sue to challenge NIL GO. If the power conference leadership is already determining that we need to ask our schools to sign documentation saying they will not sue to challenge the decisions made through this NIL GO software and the College Sports Commission, that tells me that the conference commissioners and the leadership are not super confident that programs are going to be happy with this, or that they're not super confident that if they do file lawsuits, that they won't win. Like, I think there's concern that this could really hamper this plan that these commissioners and these power conference leadership came up with. If they can't enforce it, it's just kind of falls by the wayside. Also worth noting that while many of these programs are hesitant to sign this memo from the power conference leadership, which doesn't surprise me, but also it's not prohibiting student athletes don't have to sign this. NIL collectives don't have to sign this. So if I'm a student athlete and I, commit to Kentucky, and I commit to Kentucky because they promised me $500,000 of their directly from the school, but they also promised me, hey, we'll get you an extra mil through third-party NIL deals. And I apply and I submit my, application through NIL GO to get a $1 million payment from a booster through some NIL deal. And the NIL GO says no. And I say, no, I know that I'm allowed to do this. Or so-and-so from Duke got the same amount of money to do the same thing. Why shouldn't I? And I hire a lawyer. I think there's a very reasonable chance that this whole thing kind of falls apart like a house of cards. And they say, well, some judge, somebody out there says antitrust laws kind of say you can't really determine that this player shouldn't be paid this amount of money. Like, that's not up to you. It's a free market. And I think that could reasonably happen. So I'm very interested to see what the future holds here. I think that the way it is currently constructed and the way that they are kind of rolling this out and hoping that this will work is not sustainable for a very long time. And I think the stricter that the College Sports Commission is early on, I think that in their minds, maybe they think it makes sense to be really rigid about this and really preventing any pay for play, like any obvious kind of nefarious intentions of like, we're going to submit this and, so-and-so player is going to do a 30-second commercial for a Ford dealership where the owner is a former, Kentucky player, and he's going to get paid $1 million. And the College Sports Commission is going to say, absolutely not. It is not commensurate with other deals to get paid $1 million for a 30-second ad. Like, I think we're going to see that start to shake out. But if the College Sports Commission is just railroading every single one of these things and trying to make it as difficult as possible, then they're just opening themselves up for a quick lawsuit, potentially losing said lawsuit, and then we're back to square one. So this is something I'm keeping a close eye on. Something I'm keeping a close eye on for programs that we're going to talk about a lot in the rest of the show, like the Gonzaga Bulldogs, who have a unique advantage temporarily where they have, assuming they can get up to $20 million in revenue, they can spend a much higher percentage of that money on basketball than many of their competitors because they have to share that money with football. How long does that advantage last? Well, if this NIL Go thing doesn't work, if antitrust laws are proven to make it so that they can't enforce these pay-for-play situations, then this may not last very long at all. And even if it does, even if it works short-term, people are going to figure out ways to get around this. They're going to find ways to do it. Like, you can't tell me that Mark Pope in Kentucky, who spent close to $20 million on this year's roster, is going to be fine spending less than half that next year when they only have, whatever amount of money that the University of Kentucky gives them while they're splitting it with football and the rest of their sports. And then these third-party NIL deals that have to be quote unquote legitimate. I just don't think that's going to last very long. So it's something I'm keeping a close eye on as we get started with it here in the month of July 2025, with the House settlement finally starting to go into effect for these college programs across the country. Well, Texas State, necessary addition for the Pac-12. They needed to make this happen. They made it happen. They are a viable conference going forward. It's good news for the Pac-12. Even if it's not great for the basketball in that conference. We're going to talk about that and what's next for the league coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, summer sports are in full swing. Whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. And if you're already following the action, then why not just make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are out getting sunburned on the beach. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. So whether you're playing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right out into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. Since we're talking new Pac-12, I know this upcoming season's not Pac-12 yet, but the championship odds for some of those teams, Gonzaga in the lead at plus 3,500 to take home the championship. San Diego State is next at plus 15,000 for Brian Dutcher's team. Utah State is 20,000, and then Boise State and Colorado State come in next at plus 50,000 if you're feeling a little spicy about some of those Mountain West schools in their final year in the conference. And folks, if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast, moving away from our conversation about the House settlement and the rules going into effect on July 1st, including the NIL Go and the spot to submit those $600+ NIL deals and what that might look like going forward, to instead talk about conference realignment. We knew that the Pac-12 was going to make an addition before July 1st, 2026. We knew that they needed to get a full-time eighth member into the conference. They need, in order to be FBS eligible on the football side, they needed to have a full member that was also played football, because they had 7 football playing full members, and then Gonzaga, who is a full member in the Pac-12, but does not have a football program. So they couldn't just go add an affiliate team that just played football. They had to add a school in all sports that also had football. That ended up being Texas State. after, the timing didn't work out with the Mountain West schools that they didn't get the first time around, like UNLV and to some extent Air Force, which was in that conversation. They had a lot of conversations with schools in the American Athletic Conference, notably Memphis, but also Tulane and UTSA and a few others. And the exorbitant exit fees from the American Athletic Conference made that not a viable option for the Pac-12 either. And so eventually the conference turned their attention to Texas State and the Bobcats out of the Sun Belt Conference. And again, the timing was good because not only was July 1st a key day for the Pac-12, but for the Texas State, the buyout from the Sun Belt was $5 million on June 30th and $10 million on July 1st. So they wanted to get it done before the calendar flipped to July. The Pac-12 wanted to get it done before the calendar flipped to July. So they get it done on Monday morning. It had been reported really a while before that, but it's certainly late last week. It was known that there was conversations that the Pac-12 had with the school, that it had with the Sun Belt. We knew they were scheduling a Board of Regents meeting on Monday morning. And of course, that ultimately ended up being the vote to confirm Texas State joining the Pac-12. So there's a lot to unpack here. We won't get into all of it necessarily at this point. As I'm recording this right now, we don't know how much of a share Texas State is getting out of the new media rights deal. It doesn't sound like they're getting a full share, but is it a 75% share that bumps up to a full share next year? Is it 50% that bumps up to full share in 2 years? What does it look like? Again, we don't know at this time. I suspect it's probably fairly close to a full share and bumps up soon because the Pac-12 is starting to run out of leverage at the end there. And I think Texas State may have gotten themselves a fairly quality deal out of this whole situation. While there's a lot of reasons that this move makes sense for the Pac-12 geographically, getting a footprint in Texas, the program that's made a back-to-back bowl games, it's fair to say it's not an entirely exciting move on the men's basketball side of things. This program has been D1 since 1984. They've only made the NCAA tournament twice, once as a 15 seed in 1994, again as a 16 seed in 1997. They did not win either game. They did win the Sun Belt regular season twice in 2021 and 2022, but they did not win the Sun Belt Conference tournament, so they did not make the NCAA tournament. Ken Palm's program rating for Texas State going back to 1997 has them 215th, which for the record would be the worst school in the WCC. It would be one of the worst schools in the former WAC. It's not they're below Seattle U, below Eastern Washington, below University of Portland, like just not a program that has had a lot of success on the men's basketball side of things. But for the Pac-12, it's still an important step. And now we kind of figure out what's next for them. They have their flagship media deal with CBS. We know they're going to add other media partners. Sounds like the CW is going to be one of them. It sounds like Warner Brothers Discovery, which is TNT TBS, is going to be one of them. Maybe there's also a streamer, Amazon, maybe Apple TV, maybe ESPN Plus gets involved for some of the non-revenue sports. Maybe ESPN gets involved fully as well. They have a tight relationship with Gonzaga. They may want to continue that and get involved at least on the basketball side as well. And then after that, I think you start to look at additional expansion candidates. I've seen Memphis mentioned as a football-only addition. This would be obviously devastating for fans who want to see Memphis basketball competing in the Pac-12 against the likes of Gonzaga and San Diego State and Colorado State and the rest in that conference. I do think if Memphis were to be added as a football-only member, there would at least come with a scheduling agreement, which could at least allow us to get some non-con matchups between Gonzaga and Memphis or Memphis and San Diego State. But there's also rumors of like maybe the Pac-12 just goes and gets like UTSA or Rice as a football-only member, in which case it's not as appealing to have a basketball scheduling agreement with those schools where it just doesn't really move the needle all that much. And then the last potential here, and we're not going to dig super far into it, but St. Mary's has been kind of just sitting and waiting and wishing and wondering and hoping that perhaps the Pac-12 will circle back around to them. A unnamed Pac-12 athletic director has indicated that the Pac-12 is looking to have 10 basketball members for scheduling simplicity, which makes a ton of sense. If right now the Pac-12 stays pat at 9 and just adds a football affiliate member like Memphis or whomever, then I think that's advantageous for St. Mary's, where they may be able to kind of wedge their way in as a basketball-only addition, joining the conference on the men's basketball side. Then you have Gonzaga, St. Mary's, San Diego State, Boise State, Colorado State, Utah State, tons of teams that have had very recent NCAA tournament success, a very strong basketball conference. You keep that fun rivalry between Gonzaga and St. Mary's. I could see St. Mary's and San Diego State developing into a fun rivalry as well. I think that would be a really fun addition. It would kind of consolidate the best programs on the West Coast in men's basketball into one conference. Would be a huge blow for the WCC, mind you. I think it would be a devastation for them. It's outside of maybe San Francisco and Santa Clara starting to feel like, hey, we got a much better chance of actually making the NCAA tournament now without Gonzaga and St. Mary's. But obviously that's a big blow for the WCC's future media partners and things of that nature if they do end up losing St. Mary's as well. Well, we've been on Gonzaga, so we're going to stay on Gonzaga. They're having a big old Mario party in Spokane right now after Gonzaga lands Spanish guard Mario Saint-Supery. We're going to talk about what he brings to Mark Few's team coming up in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast. And we're closing out the show, kind of continuing our conversation about Pac-12 basketball, but focusing more on Mark Few's Gonzaga Bulldogs as they have made a big-time addition to the roster in Spanish guard Mario Saint-Supery. This has been known or reported or discussed for literal months now that Saint-Supery was going to come to Gonzaga, but it had not been finalized. We're still dotting the I's, crossing the T's, whatever needed to happen. Saint-Supery finally reported on Monday morning that he was leaving his club, Baxi Manresa, which is in Spain, and he was coming to the United States to continue his career. He still didn't say Gonzaga in the post, but about an hour later, Gonzaga finally released a press release indicating that, yes, Mario Saint-Supery is committed to the Zags. He is joining the program for this upcoming season. Again, they've been connected to him since April. So this is a move that was a long time coming, but a huge addition for Mark Few's club. Saint-Supery is a 19-year-old 6'3" guard from Malaga, Spain. He played last year, like I said, for Baxi Manresa in the Liga ACB in Spain, averaged about 6.5 points, little under 4 assists, and 2 rebounds per game. And again, with international stats, it's always important to know the quality of competition. This is a full professional league. This is not a U20 league. This is not a college type league. He was playing against grown men. He was playing against 25, 28, 30, 32-year-olds and averaging 6 points and 4 assists per game as somebody who at the time was 18 years old playing in this league. He previously played for Unicaja in Liga ACB, which is the same team as former Gonzaga forward Killian Tilly. Killian Tilly was playing on the team this year. Mario Saint-Supery was playing on the team last year. Killian Tilly is like 27 or 28. So again, you're talking about Saint-Supery playing against grown men, and he was on this team last year when he was 17. So he has played against high-level professionals for the last couple of years as somebody who is still a teenager, now going to come to the United States where he's going to play against people his own age for the most part in the WCC. And when he has played against his own age on the U18 FIBA team in 2024, he dominated. Saint-Supery averaged just under 22 points, 6.5 assists, and 5.5 rebounds per game. I hesitate to make this comparison, and it's more of a play style comparison than a upside comparison. But if you watch Saint-Supery's tape, or if you read articles of people who have watched him live in person in Europe, the name that gets floated around a lot is Ricky Rubio, because Saint-Supery is such a good passer. He's constantly looking to get his teammates open. He's a hellraiser in transition. He gets out, he goes, he runs. He loves to make those throw-ahead passes. He loves to find his teammates open in positions to score. He can break down a defense very effectively. He needs to work on his confidence as an offensive player, knowing when to attack the basket, when to settle for jump shots, when to make the defense pay, because they're so focused on stopping you as a playmaker that they're not stopping you as a scorer. These are things that Mark Few is very good at getting out of players. Look at the confidence for Ryan Nembhard as a scorer throughout his couple of years in Spokane, and you can really see how much more confident he was this year when teams went under those screens and he would knock down open shots. So I think Saint-Supery is going to fit in really nicely for this Gonzaga team. I suspect because it's already July and he's just getting to campus now that he's not going to step into a starting role right away. Gonzaga also has Colgate transfer Braden Smith. Not that Braden Smith, another Braden Smith. He transferred to Gonzaga last year, but he redshirted this season behind Ryan Nembhard. He spent an entire year soaking up knowledge from Nembhard, from Nolan Hickman, from watching this team, from competing against them in practice. He now has the offense down pat. He understands the system. He understands his role. He has a full year plus advantage on Saint-Supery and very little time for Saint-Supery to make up that ground as he just got to Spokane. So to me, Braden Smith's Gonzaga starter. He's going to play big minutes, but I think Saint-Supery will play a solid role as a freshman, and I think that role will increase as the season goes on based on what I've seen from him on tape, what we've seen from him, what we know about him as a player. It sure seems like he's the kind of guy who's really going to thrive in Mark Few's system, who's really going to thrive in this high-octane offense. We've seen, Gonzaga's point guard play in the last, really since he took over as the head coach, but really even just focusing on the last 5 to 10 years, you've had Andrew Nembhard, you've had Jalen Suggs, you've of course had Ryan Nembhard, you've had Josh Perkins, you've had Nigel Williams-Goss, so many incredibly talented point guards through this system. And Saint-Supery kind of has so many of the same skills and so much of the same upside as those players. And it's so rare. Gonzaga hits on their guard recruits at a very high clip. They hit on their international recruits at an extremely high clip. Yes, they miss on some guys. But for the most part, when they bring in high-profile international players, they don't play much as freshmen. That's pretty standard. Rui Hachimura barely got off the bench as a freshman. 2 years later, he was an All-American. Shemek Karnowski barely got off the bench as a freshman. 4 years later, he was a starting center. 5 years later, he was a starting center for a team that went to the national championship. Killian Tilly had a ridiculous 4-year career. Joel Ayayi, a ridiculous, excellent 4-year career for this Gonzaga program. Philip Petrusev, Domantas Sabonis, Roni Turioff. How much more do you want me to do? It is a tremendous list of successful players from this Gonzaga program, or from international ranks into this Gonzaga program. I have very little doubt that Mario Saint-Supery will be another success story for Coach Few and the Zags. I'm just not super confident what that role looks like in year one. Part of it is to be determined by the eligibility waiver being applied for by Grand Canyon transfer wing Tyon Grant Foster. Grant Foster committed to Gonzaga earlier in the month of June. He is a 6'7" wing who scored 20 per game and was WAC Player of the Year at Grand Canyon. In the 23-24 season last year, his numbers dipped a little bit, in part because he was dealing with an early season ankle injury. But Grant Foster is a very talented player who I think is going to play the three, but he's somebody who's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. And I think if he's eligible and able to get that waiver, which he should get the waiver based on what we've seen from previous players in similar situations to him. I think that he will get that waiver. And in that case, I think he takes up a huge role for Gonzaga. If he does not, that does put a situation where, I think Jalen Warley steps into the starting role, the Florida State transfer who spent a few months at Virginia, but ultimately never played there after Tony Bennett retired. He steps into the starting role, but I do think that clears more playing time for Mario Saint-Supery to get a bigger role in year one. Either way, this Gonzaga team, maybe not the flashiest offseason they've ever had, but at the end of the day, they replenished some shooting and Adam Miller from Arizona State. They replenished some on-ball scoring mentality from Tyon Grant Foster. Braden Smith should step capably into the role vacated by Ryan Nembhard. They still have their front court in Graham Ike and Braden Huff together. If Steele Venters is healthy, he had some shooting off the bench. Jalen Warley and Emmanuel Innocente are great wing defenders. And now you have your high upside backup point guard in Saint-Supery. There's a lot to like about this Gonzaga roster as they head into their final season as members of the West Coast Conference. It's going to wrap it up for me today here in the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Always a special shout out to those everydayers. We appreciate you. We got more fun stuff coming your way later this week. Continue to keep you up to date on the new changes with the House settlement. Keep you up to date on recruiting, on the FIBA U19 tournament, some exciting performances by some incoming freshmen. We're going to talk about that later this week as well. Thanks again, folks. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the McBruins. And until next time, peace out.